And so, good morning, everyone and everywhere. So we are here in Luxembourg, and also we have at the moment more than 40 people online. And today I'm going to talk about the essence of Buddhist meditation, but I don't want to make it purely intellectual. Just a second, I need to adjust something. Okay. I don't want to make it purely intellectual, so we're going to deal with our mind in a certain way. And first of all, there is a very, very essential and precise instruction from one of the Buddhist teachers of meditation, Jigme Lingpa, and he said that when the body is straight, then channels are straight. When the channels are straight, the prana is straight. And when prana is straight, then mind is straight. So it means, essentially it means that if you have a perfect position of the body, which means stable and balanced, then very naturally our mind calms down just by itself. So many people have problems with calming the mind down, but they usually don't pay so much attention to their position, physical position. And if you don't pay attention to our physical position, then we cannot really calm the mind down. It's very difficult. It's possible, but it's very difficult. So first of all, we sit comfortably. If it's comfortable for us to sit on the floor, that's fine. But we are not very much used usually to sit on the floor. So we sit on a chair, and it's much easier on a chair to sit comfortably. But we need to notice how we feel. So we feel, first of all, we feel the support. We feel the support of, in our condition. So it doesn't mean we think about a chair or floor beneath us. But it means that we have the experience, the feeling of support, having a support. We connect to it. And then we keep our body straight, which means balance. Because if you do not keep our body balanced, then what happens? Automatically, our body perceives imbalance as danger. Because it's evolutionary. To lose balance was dangerous. Then we could have fallen from a tree or from a rock, and then we could be an easy target. So evolutionary, we developed this capacity that when we are imbalanced, then our body perceives it as danger, and then our mind becomes agitated also. So that's why we can learn to keep balance of the body. And also keeping the flow of our breathing free. Because again, if we do not keep it free, if the breathing has to overcome obstacles, then it's very difficult to calm down the mind and to make the mind clear. So let's try for just a few moments to find a good position, just to feel the ground, feel the support. Check if you are breathing freely. And just enjoy being in this state. Okay, understand what's happening with the sound here. Okay, yeah, now it works. So, the essence of Buddhist meditation. And first of all, the Buddhist meditation means that there is some kind of a purpose. And this purpose is not to just calm down, because nowadays meditation is very popular, very famous, and it is used very much for several purposes, like relieving the stress, which is very good, and also to increase productivity, which is partially good, but partially not so good. Yeah? Why is it good? Because why we have problems with our productivity? Because our attention is disrupted. Our attention doesn't stay long, and it is very difficult to keep present, to keep attention to what we are doing. And that's why we have so many problems, and particularly nowadays when our attention is a commodity, or maybe a resource, rather a resource than a commodity, because there is a fight for our attention. So as soon as we go outside, what do we see? This is the fighting field, battlefield for our attention. You see, even at the entrance to this building, what do we see? We see advertising this stand. What is its function? To grab our attention. And then we can see many posters on walls. What is their function? To grab our attention. We open our devices, our computers or our smartphones, first of all. What's happening? We see advertising. What do they want to do? They want to grab our attention. Then, for example, if for a few days you don't visit your account in Instagram, what happens then? They start to send you messages. Are you okay? There are so many interesting things happening here. Why are you not coming? Because they're afraid to lose you. Because then they resell your attention to someone else. This is the point. And since there is this battle for our attention becomes disrupted. And because changing the focus of attention is one of the most energy consuming functions or operations of our brain. Because our brain has to pump blood from one area to another to change the focus of attention, to activate different zones. We have limited amount of blood in our brain. And then the activity of blood circulation indicates the activity of different cognitive functions. This is how fMRI works, when we are scanning the brain and we're trying to understand what's happening. So, for example, if we have visual focus and then we change to audio, to listening, then it means that there should be a change in neural activity in our brain. And for this, brain needs to pump the blood from one place to another. Then it requires a lot of energy. And that's why if we are changing the focus of our attention too much during the day, after that we feel totally devastated and exhausted. And then of course it's difficult to be productive in this way. So, because we cannot concentrate on what we are doing. And then meditation can be a tool to restore, at least partially, this lost capacity of being present, of being concentrated. Then, of course, if we are not being present, if we are losing focus and we get distracted so easily, then we make many mistakes. And everyone makes mistakes. People who are working on streets, they make mistakes. People who are working in transportation, they make mistakes. People who are working in office, they make mistakes. Politicians make huge mistakes. We can see that so many problems, so many catastrophes are just because people cannot keep the focus, cannot keep their presence. So this is a good reason to do the practice of meditation. And it is also very important for everything. Because if we cannot pay attention, then we cannot listen. If we cannot listen, we cannot understand. And we can also see that people, how people are listening now. Usually they catch or they read, and they listen or they read and they just catch triggering words. So there is a triggering words. Nowadays, one of the most triggering words is Trump. So, for example, yeah, or climate change, or vaccination a few years ago, etc. And then when there is this triggering word, then people don't usually even read and try to analyze what's being said, what's being written, but just react on that. And that's why we have such polarization. And of course, we cannot understand, we cannot study, first of all. So, for example, in Buddhist teaching from the ancient time, they say that a person should be a proper receptacle for the teachings. And one of the requirements is that this person is able to listen without interruption, to listen without distraction, to listen without interfering with one's own ideas, to be fresh and open. This is very important, and this is very difficult. So this is a good side of meditation regarding our current situation. The bad side of this is that meditation becomes a tool for squeezing people even more. Like you become productive. Why? Because then you can bring more benefit to your company. You become like a perfect corporate warrior, or corporate slave, whatever is there. So you work more, you produce more, you use meditation, to concentrate. But what's it all about? Basically, it's all about money. It's a kind of ultimate goal of business, to make money. And in Buddhism, the idea of meditation, the principle of meditation, is not becoming more productive, but it's more about making our mind a tool, very clear and precise tool for self-cognition, for understanding oneself. And we know there is a famous Latin expression which is nocet to ipsum, nocete ipsum. Yeah, so cognize yourself. And why? Because we are the root of everything. There is a joke. One guy is saying, well, I just realized what was the common thing for all my past failed relationships. So what was that? Me. Yeah. So in this way, whatever we are involved into, then our mind is participating in that. Our mind is judging whatever is good, whatever is bad. And that's why we need to understand our mind. It's sometimes called the root of everything is our mind. Not the God, not the nature, but our mind in our personal condition, in our individual situation. Our mind is basically the root of everything, of how we perceive, how we judge, and then how we act upon our judgment. And there was a very famous Buddhist teacher in the 8th century who came from India to Tibet. His name was Guru Padmasambhava. And he said many essential things. And he said particularly that what we call enlightenment, and we can be interested in the idea of enlightenment, not the enlightenment of like France of the 18th century, but enlightenment in terms of like being enlightened like a Buddha, to have a kind of a perfect clarity, etc., and being free from suffering. So the enlightenment, what is the enlightenment? And Guru Padmasambhava was saying that clear understanding of one's own mind is the enlightenment of all Buddhas. So it's not about struggling, it's not about asceticism, It's not about self-restrictions, etc., or making sacrifice. It's not about that. It's all about understanding our own mind. And of course, we can discover that our mind is going wild in certain situations. So we might try to avoid those situations when our mind is no longer clear, or no longer stable, or is very prone to some kind of judgments and influences, etc. Yeah. And then we use meditation to understand our mind, first of all. And again, as Guru Padmasambhava said, quoting some ancient texts, he said that all phenomena abide in mind. And of course, if we are educated people and we know what solipsism is, we might think that this is like solipsism, that everything abides in my mind. But this is not solipsism. It does not deny that things exist. It doesn't say that when we turn our head to another side, that whatever we don't see, it stops existing. No, of course not. But the point is that whatever we see, whatever we feel, whatever we hear, exists in our condition. So, for example, it does not mean that the tree that we see is inside us. Or for example, now you're looking at me, and it doesn't mean that I'm inside you. Fortunately not. As well as the other way around. I don't know what we should have done if it were the case. But it means that what you see as me, what you hear as my voice is you. It's not me. Even from scientific point of view, it's quite obvious. Because what is visual perception? There is a light from the window, light from the lamps, and this light is reflecting from me. Maybe not perfectly. I'm not a perfect mirror. But still, it is reflecting from me. Then this light goes into your eyes. And then there is a refraction in the eyes, and actually then I'm upside down in your eyes, because it works like a lens, the eye. So I'm already upside down in your eyes, and very small, smaller than an eye. And then this light falls on retina, where we have few types of receptors that perceive colors and perceive the luminosity or brightness. And then it is transformed through chemical reactions. It transforms into electric signal, and this signal also, combination of electricity and chemistry, it goes through the optical nerve to the occipital lobe of our brain. What happens there is not yet very clear, but what is clear? The clear thing is that what we perceive is not reality. There is a reality behind what we perceive, but what we namely perceive is the production of our own state, of our own system, organism, and particularly mind. Then also, for example, we see the plethora of colors. We see different colors like red color, green color, blue color, purple color, etc. But then somehow, in this variety of colors, we see people, we see objects. How does it happen? This is happening because of our minds. Our mind is carving out of this range of visual perception. It is carving out images, like gestalts. It is carving out, and then we perceive some different and separate things, even though what we perceive is in real sense just a range of colors, multiple colors. How can we understand it? For example, if we start to zoom into a picture, then we lose the understanding what's there. And only when we have a proper distance, we start to understand what is there. Also, when we zoom out, we don't understand what's there. When we are getting closer, we start to see, we start to recognize, we recognize images. And this image recognition is the function of mind. And we see what we learn to see, what we are trained to see. Yeah? This is what we see. And what is learning that? Mind. Mind is discriminating that this is a blue color or indigo color. If it's a man or a woman, mind is discriminating that. It exists in mind. That's why we can say that all phenomena, all phenomenal existence, in the phenomena, in a Kantian sense, because there are phenomena and there are noumena. Noumena that we know nothing about, basically, which is a kind of, we can say, reality. But phenomena are our state. So all phenomena, they're in mind. What we recognize, what we hear, what we see, what we recognize in what we hear and what we see. Images and sounds, etc. Like the sounds of articulate talking, articulate speech, the sounds of language that we understand. We are trained to recognize them. What is trained? Mind. So in this way, everything is in mind. And then we have many thoughts. But to notice thoughts, we must be present. And presence is a kind of a requirement number one. The presence. We can also say mindfulness. But presence means that we are aware of what is happening. We are aware of what we are feeling. We are aware of what we are doing. We are aware of what we are saying. And most of all, we are aware of what we are thinking. And then we can discover our thoughts. And I can give a simple example of what the presence is. Try to raise your hand. Try to raise your hand, noticing how you're doing it. Usually we don't notice, we just raise our hand. So, just raise your hand and notice how you're doing it. What you feel while you're raising your hand. This is an example of being present, because usually we just raise our hand, we want to say hello to someone, say, hello, but we do not feel very much about it. We just have an idea of saying hello, but we do not feel the presence of the movement of our hand. Unless our hand is injured, then we feel immediately. And then I have a tricky question for you. And the tricky question is, okay, you more or less, so everyone could raise their hands, etc. How did you do that? You raised your hand. You can try again to check. And how did you do that? Okay. We know how to do that, right? We know how to do that. But we don't know how we do that. Okay. And then, for example, if you meet a person who cannot raise his or her hand, and this person is coming to you, and he can see that you are raising your hand easily, and then this person is saying, but please teach me, explain to me how to raise my hand. Would you be able to explain? Not easy, no? So this is more or less what I feel when I'm asked to explain how to meditate. Because it can be trained, but it cannot really be explained. Yeah. But the first requirement is to be present. We are present and we learn to understand where our mind is at the moment. It's not about directing our mind and keeping it somewhere, but it's about understanding where our mind is at the moment. Is it here? Or is it in the office? Or is it in the toilet? We can be here, our mind can well be in the toilet, right? Or it can well be in a restaurant. Or it can well be on a date. It can be in trouble, in some problem. It can be in work. We are here, our mind is somewhere else. So the first thing is to recognize where our mind is. And instead of being ourselves here and our mind being somewhere else, to be together. So we cannot be at work or in a restaurant at this very moment because we are here. So the only option is to bring our mind here. And to be here together with the mind. So this is the thing that ensues or follows from being present. We recognize how we are being distracted. And then we can do a simple exercise and just discover how we feel right now when there is nothing to accomplish, when there is nothing to achieve, right now. No problem to solve. And how do we feel? How do we feel right now when there is nothing to achieve? Everything is already achieved, accomplished.
Good.
Yeah. And then we can just sit. Why do we just sit? Because we are already sitting. So this is a kind of one of the first things that we learn before trying to apply some meditation techniques. We learn to just sit. And then we can have a feeling, but when are we going to meditate? And then we can notice that. When we have this feeling, when am I going to meditate? Then we have an agitation. And then we just breathe out and continue just sitting. And then we might feel bored because nothing is happening and become agitated because of this boredom. And we notice it and we just relax in this, noticing our agitation. So in this way we learn just sitting. But it is said just sitting just because we are sitting already. If we were standing in this moment, I would be explaining just standing. Sometimes we are sitting, but sometimes we are standing. So while we are standing, we are just standing. And while we are lying down, we are just lying down. And then we can notice all those impulses that arise in us and propel us, push us to action, even if there is no need for this action. When there is a need for action, we do. It means if we know that we need to go to a toilet, we don't remain just sitting or just standing, because then at some point we will be just pissing. It means we have to go to a toilet. But if there is no need, no urge, but some kind of an artificial urge is arising and pushing us to do something, pushing us to entertain ourselves. So we are just sitting the way we are. We don't need a special position for that. And then when we learn just sitting, just standing, just lying down, we can learn just walking. We can learn just raising the hand if it's necessary. We can learn just talking. We can learn in any activity to just do that. It means that our activity is not influenced, is not interfered by neurosis of our mind. It means that when we are eating, we are eating. When we are walking, we are walking. And it means we are being together with our mind. We are not shutting down the mind. We are not killing our mind. Because many people have this idea. Once they discover that mind is the source of all problems, they start to try to shut it down. But mind is not only the source of all problems, mind is also the source of all happiness. So if we are shutting it down, we have a problem. So it's not about shutting the mind down or destroying the mind. The point is knowing how the mind is. The point is knowing, for example, at this very moment, our mind, is it calm or agitated? Just at this very moment. And we don't need to label it. We don't need to keep track, because then we are going to be distracted with that. But we just know. The same way how we know that whether it's light or dark. We always know whether it's light or dark, right? We don't need to say, oh, now it's light or now it's dark. No, we just see it. We don't need a judgment. So in the same way, we can discover if our mind at the moment is agitated or quiet. In the same way, we can discover if our mind at this very moment is clear, bright, or dull and foggy and sleepy. In the same way, before we start to change our mind, because our idea is always to start changing something. We don't like something and then we change something. For example, we don't like what the government is doing. Then we say, oh, we are going to change the government. But then the new government comes and is continuing to do exactly the same things. Yeah? And then we think, oh, maybe we change the government again. And then the government number one comes back. Yeah? But we have an idea that we can change the government, and we feel, oh, we are free people, we can change governments. We can change the government, we can influence the government, and those poor people in authoritarian countries, they cannot change their governments. But in real sense, it's the same. I'm saying because I have both experiences. I grew up in a totalitarian country, in the Soviet Union. And now I live in a democratic country. Yeah. And I'm visiting all like democratic countries of the West. And I don't see much difference in this way. Yeah. But we have an idea, oh, we want to change something. But before we want to change something, we need to understand how the situation is and what are causal connections between things. Why certain things are happening. There is an old joke saying that if the brothel stops bringing money, it doesn't make sense to move beds and arrange beds in a different order. It means you have to hire new whores. Because this is the cause of problems. And if you don't understand the cause of problems and we are just reacting on something that attracts our attention, then we are not solving a problem. We are making the problem worse. So, before we start to change our minds, before we start to modify something, it is important to understand the situation, to understand how the mind is. Yeah? It's like starting a business. I don't know if you ever started any business, but if we are starting a business, then we should know, understand what could be the sources of income, what is the condition of market, what could be our expenses, what are the laws, etc. So we need to know all that. It requires a lot of knowledge, starting a business. And then sometimes people think, oh, I'm going to start a business. And they just lose all their money because they don't understand how it works. So in the same way, if you want to change anything, first we need to understand how it works. Then we can change. So if you want to change our situation, we need to understand our situation. And the key point of our situation is our own mind. And then when we are just sitting, we can discover that our mind is still working. And we can discover how much different trash is coming. Yeah? Something that we might not have seen before is coming to light. Yeah? And we start to see those things. And then we can discover that that trash is something which is propelling us to act, to push us to act. And where does this trash coming from? So let's try to discover. We can try to discover. So observe if you have thoughts. If you have different impulses now. And try to notice where they're coming from. Where is this mind, which is the source of all of them? Where is this mind which is observing thoughts? Very simple question. You have thoughts, yeah? Do you? Because if you don't, that doesn't make sense what I'm saying. So you do. You're sure. You're absolutely positive you have thoughts, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, how do you know that? With what do you perceive your thoughts? If I ask you a question, with what do you perceive the colors? Can you answer me? Can you answer or not?
Comparing white color with others.
No, but it's very simple. You see, okay, do you see me?
Yes.
What should you do to stop seeing me?
Close our eyes.
Close your eyes, yeah, very easy, right? Do you hear me?
Yes.
have to do in order to stop hearing me? You close your ears. This is the easiest way. Okay, of course you can leave, but the easiest way is to close ears. Okay. So if, for example, I'm going to emit some smell that you won't like, what are you going to do? You're going to close your nose, right? Yeah. And of course, you're not going to taste me, yeah, or touch me, etc. But the principle is clear. But if you have thoughts, if you have a thought of me, what do you need to close to stop thinking of me?
Consciousness.
But how? How do you close that? Consciousness is a good name, but how? The point is pragmatic. How?
Fainting.
Fainting. Fainting is not an option. It's like the best. What is the best remedy for migraine? Guillotine. Guillotine. The best remedy for migraine. Yeah. So fainting is not an option. But we can have thoughts. But sometimes we don't have thoughts. Or we don't notice our thoughts. So the point is to discover what is the organ that perceives thoughts. Because we definitely perceive thoughts. Sometimes there are thoughts, they're different, we can understand whether our thoughts are many or few, whether they are clear or unclear, whether the thoughts are good thoughts or bad thoughts. We can clearly understand that, yeah? So we cannot deny that we have a perception of a type of phenomena which is called thoughts. Yeah? We have this perception. We can see when thoughts are there, and we can see when thoughts are not there. Okay. Do we perceive thoughts through our eyes? No. Do we perceive thoughts through our ears? No. Do we perceive thoughts through other senses, other 5 senses? No. Then, how do we perceive? And it's not a matter of saying that this is brain, yeah? Because brain for us, unless we work as a pathologoanatomist, brain is a kind of abstract idea. We do not see our brain. We might have seen brains of other people, but we do not perceive our own brain. It's not the point. The point is to discover with what we are seeing thoughts, with what we are seeing the absence of thoughts, presence of thoughts and absence of thoughts. Because for seeing objects we need light, but even there is no light, we can understand that there is no light. So in the same way, how can we see thoughts? And for this we need to, in a certain way, turn our mind backwards. Because usually our mind is involved into objects. What we see, what we hear, so our mind is unfolded outside. Or it can be absorbed into thinking, being inside. But it's turning mind backwards. It means turning the mind to its own source. Who is noticing thoughts? Who is thinking? Or we would rather say, what is thinking? What is that thing which is perceiving thoughts? What is that thing which is generating thoughts? So this is exactly the point. And then we can also discover that when we are no longer involved into thoughts and we are just noticing how thoughts are coming and going, when we are noticing this and we are not involved into thoughts, it means that we are not conditioned by them, we are not thinking them. So actually it's a good discovery that we can discover that there are thoughts but we are not thinking them. Having thoughts and thinking thoughts are two different things, because thinking thoughts is a deliberate process. I want to think about what I'm going to have for lunch, and then we start to figure out what we are going to have for lunch. This is we are thinking. But then sometimes we are working and instead of thinking about our work, we start thinking about lunch. Not deliberately, but compulsively. So we have thoughts about lunch, but we are not thinking deliberately about lunch. So when we are observing thoughts, this is one of the first things that we discover. No. So we discover, and then if we can remain in this presence of thoughts just happening without thinking them, it means not following thoughts, but also not blocking thoughts, but noticing that they are there. And then we can shift the focus of our interest from thoughts onto where the thoughts are arising. Now, and it is not so easy to notice, because somehow where the thoughts are arising is emptiness. And for us it is very difficult to notice what is absent. It's very easy to notice what is present, but it's very difficult to notice what is absent. I can give you an example. If you have a company of people which is always meeting together, maybe like 10 people, maybe in your office, and then when you come to this company and you see those people, how soon do you realize that someone is missing? If you were not particularly interested to meet this particular person, of course, if you are waiting for this particular person to come, then you immediately notice that this person is not there. But if you didn't have this idea, you see, if maybe you remember being at school. I don't really know how it happens in Luxembourg, but usually in many countries, when we are at school, when we are at class, what does the teacher start from? He is checking who is there. This teacher maybe is teaching this class for several years, seeing the same people all over again. But they cannot discover immediately who is absent. Unless it is some kind of an obnoxious person, like which is always creating troubles, then the teacher is saying, oh, he is not there. Whew. Thanks God. Yeah. I was this kind. Yeah. But otherwise, the teacher needs to call everyone's name to discover who is absent. Not who is present, but who is absent. It's a totally different cognitive task to discover what is absent. What is missing? It's very difficult to notice what is missing because we are concentrated on what is present. So it's emptiness, it's absence. So where thoughts are is some kind of absence. It's like space. How do we recognize, for example, aerial space? How do we recognize it? We can look at the birds. And then we just notice that there is a movement of birds, but we are not concentrated on birds. But then we have an idea, but where are these birds flying? And then we discover, oh, they are flying in air. What is basically air? Air is space. It's a dimension. So this is how we discover this dimension. And in the same way, we can watch fish in the water. And when we are not concentrated on fish, the very movement of fish is demonstrating the dimension of the water. We can discover this dimension. So in the same way, where the thoughts are moving, and when we are not looking at thoughts, but we just notice their presence, we can discover that there is some kind of a medium, there is some kind of a dimension where thoughts are manifesting. We cannot say they are in front or behind or up or down or to the right, to the left, because it's a different dimension. It's not geometric dimension. But we can clearly discover that there is a spaciousness, there is a dimension where these thoughts are manifesting. And this is called the dimension of phenomena, phenomenal dimension. And it is, when we discover, it becomes as clear as the optical dimension, geometric dimension that we are all observing. Geometric space, visual space. What is the characteristic of visual space, for example? Can we see the space? Can you see the space? But can you recognize if there is space or not? Yeah, of course you can recognize. Can you point out the space? Can you point, space is there, or space is there? No? So basically, wherever we point, there is space, and even we don't point, there is space. Yeah. So this is how space is. And then, for example, if you change all the furniture in this room and we change the set of people in this room, will the space change? The space of this room, will it change or not? No. And when the time comes and this building, this nice, very comfortable and beautiful place, but sooner or later it's going to be demolished. Yeah. But what happens to the space here? Is the space going to be demolished as well? No. Can we make a border? If you open a window, where is the border between space inside and space outside? Yeah? So in a very similar way, we discover the spaciousness where thoughts are manifesting. And thoughts can change. So now we have certain kind of thoughts. Tomorrow we will have different thoughts, but the spaciousness will remain the same. It doesn't change. How can we understand it? Very easy. So you remember your personality, let's say 30 years ago. Here people are mostly from 40 years and older, maybe a little younger, but still you can remember what was 30 years ago and how your personality was. Or maybe how your personality was when you were like 8 years old. Let's put it like this. Was it different from your current personality? Your reactions, your preferences, your thoughts? Quite different. But how do you perceive this was you? Yeah. What was the same? What is the same which is connecting you when you are 8 years old, or even earlier, 3 years old, when we start to have first memories, more or less, average? Or when we are 50 years old, or when we are 70 years old? The thoughts are very different. Yeah? You know, like thoughts of success. I will tell you a joke, because it's getting a bit serious. You know? So, what is the success? You know, what is a success when you are 4 years old? You're not pissing into your pants. What is the success when you are 12 years old? You have friends. What is the success when you are 20 years old? You have sex. What is the success when you are 40 years old? You have money. What is the success when you are 60 years old? You have sex. What is the success when you are 70 years old? You have friends. What is the success when you are 80 years old? You don't piss into your pants. Yeah. So, the point is that our concerns, our thoughts in different age are very, very different, but still we perceive it's still us. So if you remember how somebody insulted us when we were 6 or 7 years old, we feel we've been insulted. What's common there? All these thoughts, all these reactions, they happen in the same space, in the same dimension. So the content can be totally substituted, totally changed, the content. But the dimension remains the same, like with changing the furniture of people in this room. But the space of this room remains the same, remains unmodified. We can paint walls in different color, with different color. The space doesn't change. We can have, I don't know, we can have a kind of a religious meeting here and prayer for peace here. Or we can have a Nazi meeting gathering here. It doesn't change the space. So in the same way, whatever we are thinking, like good thoughts or bad thoughts, whether we are thinking about God or about helping others, or whether we are thinking about sex or about killing someone, this space is the same.
Can you explain again the space? Because when you refer to this dimension here, for me, it's like you're talking about this, like this room.
No.
So.
No, it's just an example. It's just an example. But first of all, it's not about me explaining how it is. Yeah? Because I already said that for me to explain how to meditate is as difficult as for you to explain how you're raising your hand. Yeah. So it's basically impossible to explain. But through different kinds of insights and exercises and observations, we can discover. So it's not about I'm explaining and then you understand. No, it doesn't work this way. Yeah. It works through observation and discovery, and I'm just saying what we need to observe. I'm not saying what we need to understand. I'm saying what we need to observe. And we observe the thoughts. We observe how thoughts are coming and going, how they arise and how they disappear. And then when we are trained to observe thoughts without thinking them and without blocking them, these are two extremes. Thinking thoughts, being involved into thoughts, or trying to block, to stop the thoughts. These are two extremes. When we try to find balance between these two extremes, and we just remain in the presence of thoughts, at this very moment we can discover this space. At this very moment. And no explanation is going to help. Because this is about experience. Yeah. You know, like people asking what love is. Yeah. How can we explain what love is? But then we discover, yeah. Something happens to us, we enter into puberty, and then we discover, for example. Yeah. So, this is all about experience. This is not about explanations.
I have some experience that I want to say.
Yeah, please.
So, I have this training like observing thoughts, and then I knew that at the period there's a thought coming and going, and then finally when I was like, okay, I make like a back to a situation that I can observe this kind of like even emotion. For example, sometimes when like a negative emotion coming raise up, it's like a smoke. It's like a smoke from this area, from this in the here coming, and then it's like a smoke and it disappeared.
Yeah.
And I have also, when I was very young, the first time when I see him, I have also this experience that when I close to him, the thoughts disappeared. There's like a space, really
Okay.
like a space between my observing, and nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I say, because the first time when I met him, he taught me so much. I was so touched. And I want to hug him. But I don't know, at the moment, I didn't know that if I can do this because he's master. So I was like, can I? He said, of course. Then I put my head close to his neck. Then immediately, every feeling, emotion, even thoughts totally disappeared. And then for like 1 hour, 2 hours, I was, okay, I have no thought, it's totally empty. Yeah,
Okay.
that's I keep distance, keep very big distance.
Okay. So first of all, when we are, as you explained, when we are together with someone with whom we have a very good connection as a teacher, we can have this kind of experiences, like thoughts are disappearing, etc. Yeah, but then we need to learn how to have this experience without physical presence of this person. This is important.
Yeah.
Because then we become attached. We will have questions later, okay? Yeah. But the point is here that I'm not saying that we should not have thoughts and this is emptiness. No, this is a different kind of emptiness. Because the space of this room is exactly the same, whether there is furniture or there is no furniture, whether there are people or there are no people. This is the quality of space of this room. So in the same way, the quality of the space of our mind is that whether there are thoughts or emotions, or there are no thoughts or emotions, this space is the same. This dimension is the same. So there are thoughts or there are no thoughts, it's the same. This is the quality of this spaciousness. It's not in time, because very often people have an idea of emptiness of mind as being placed in time. There is a time with thoughts and there is a time without thoughts. And of course, when we have a time without thoughts, we can rest from our thoughts and we might feel, oh, it's a nice state. But we cannot remain forever without thoughts because our minds are unstoppable, because it's a ever-going flow of manifestation, ever-going flow of energy. We can have a short moment, maybe relatively short, maybe 1 hour, maybe 2 hours without thoughts, maybe more. We can develop this. And then we can rest from our problems. But the point is that when this moment, this state without thoughts is as impermanent as the state with thoughts. As Buddha said, everything is impermanent. So the state without thoughts is impermanent, and first of all, when we are losing it, we feel suffering. But it's inevitable that it will stop. We cannot expect that this state of thoughts or state of relief or happiness is going to stay forever, because nothing stays forever. Yeah. And then, of course, when it's no longer there, we are suffering. Yeah. And there is a nice story about one Indian Buddhist yogi from more or less 8th century. His name was Saraha, maybe 6th century, but very ancient time. And later he became a very, very famous practitioner. But there is a story about him that he liked to meditate and to have this state of emptiness. And he said to his wife, he was not a monk, he was a yogi, and he had a wife or girlfriend, or whatever. And he said, okay, please cook pumpkin for me, but I will go and meditate. And she said, okay. And then she went to meditation, and he fell into this state without thoughts. And he stayed for 12 years in this state. This is the legend says. And then he raised from this state, and he came back to the kitchen, and he is asking his wife, who for some reason is still there. Maybe said, 12 years of happiness without this annoying man who is always meditating. And he saw his wife there, and he said, oh, so what about pumpkin? And she said, you idiot, you spent 12 years thinking about pumpkin. Yeah. Well, and then he understood something about his meditation, that it was not the proper one. Yeah. So, but this is a very, very common mistake, that when we recognize that our thoughts, our mind is causing troubles to us, anything, maybe it's better if you are not thinking at all. But this is not a remedy. This is not a remedy. Yeah. You know, it's like when we come home one day and we go, for example, to a bathroom, and we discover that there are black stains somewhere in the corner. Black stains, and we understand it's not nice, it's mold. Yeah. And then we think, oh, maybe if I put some paint, it's gonna be okay. And then of course we don't see it, then we feel there is no problem, but the problem is still there. If there is a mold, we need to disinfect it. Yeah? We need to sanitize it. Painting doesn't work. So trying to remain without thoughts, it's like trying to paint over the mold instead of removing the mold. And this becomes a cause of a problem. And it's very good that we can have experience of having no thoughts or emotions. But this is not the point. Why do we need this experience? We need this experience to discover that whether we have a state with thoughts or we have a state without thoughts is the same. This is the point, because we cannot avoid things. It's impossible to avoid things. It's impossible to avoid disease, sickness. Some people are very much concerned, so much concerned with their health. They are always trying to avoid getting sick. But it's impossible to totally avoid getting sick. What is much better to learn is how to feel when we are sick, when we have a disease. What kind of attitude we can have when we have a disease. Yeah. It's much more important and it's much more useful. Some people feel, oh, we always want to have a relationship, and they struggle for relationship. But then they lose because everything is impermanent. And the same thing is like about war and peace. And of course, peace is much better than the war. But the problem is that everything is impermanent, and the peace is also impermanent. So it means that the war can start, can happen. In my life, I lived through 2 wars already. So it can always happen. So in the same way, it is impossible to have the condition without thoughts lasting forever. There will be always something which happens which will kick us out from this comfortable state. what is going to happen? Well, our physical death, the destruction of our physical body is going to happen inevitably. Yeah. And then all our beautiful ideas about staying in a calm and peaceful state will dissolve, will fall apart. Yeah. Because everything is impermanent. So what doesn't change? I'm not saying it is permanent, this space. I'm not saying it is permanent, because we cannot really identify whether it's permanent or not. I say it doesn't change. We cannot modify it. And this is the essence of our condition, and this is what we discover. This is what we discover when we are not involved into thoughts and when we are not blocking thoughts. And at the same time, when we are turning our awareness to its source, discovering, but who is aware of these thoughts? And when we are talking about who is aware, it's not some kind of a point. Yeah? It's not some kind of a homunculus who is inside our head and is observing all this show. No. This is a very common idea. This is an idea which is very characteristic for Western culture. It starts at least with Plato, at least. Because the first written source probably that mentions this idea is Plato in his idea about a cave and shadows. Yeah. But probably this idea is much older. And then we have a medieval idea of finding a kind of a homunculus, some kind of a living being inside this body, small being. When did this idea arise? This idea arose when people started to develop different kind of automatons. Yeah? So there were automatons, but then there was someone inside who would be moving this automaton. You know, some kings, they wanted to impress their rival kings, and they would create a kind of a automaton which would play chess. But in real sense, there was a little man, some dwarf, who would be playing chess inside, and but it would look like it's this metal thing, iron thing was playing chess, etc. So people developed this idea, and then when people started to explore brain, when they finally understood that brain was important, because for thousands of years brain was not considered important. Yeah. Heart was considered important, liver was considered important, but brain, what the hell is that? Yeah. So when they started to study brain, they were looking for something in the brain, because it became clear that this consciousness is not in the heart, is not in the liver, etc. But probably it's in the brain. And then the idea was, one of the first ideas about that, well, it is a pineal gland. Why is it a pineal gland? Because most of other things in the brain are coupled, left and right. Yeah? But pineal gland was one of few things which was single. Yeah? And in the center. So good location. Yeah? I made some research. It's very interesting actually to research the sources of culture. And you know, in many European cities we can see an artichoke. Yeah? Some ornament, artichokes everywhere. I read somewhere that this artichoke, it was actually pineal gland, so it was in a kind of alchemic symbol, because, you know, all kings were interested in alchemy. Why? Because when you become king and then there is nowhere else to grow, then the only thing which you are interested in is immortality. And then you need to find a source. Yeah, so that's why they were interested in alchemy. Yeah. But this is our idea, very common idea, to find something small, some point from which we are looking at everything, which is a kind of our real self. This is a very famous idea, real self. Also in India, this idea was very popular. It was called Atman. And it was the idea of a kind of a tiny being, tiny existence, not a human, yeah, human shape, but a kind of a shapeless, or maybe with some unclear shape, or maybe something like a sphere. Also, there could be different ideas, but something abiding in the center of our existence and leaving the body when we are dying. Yeah. So it was an idea. And the principle was always to look for this small thing, which we could call our real nature, our real self. But in Buddhist meditation, we don't have this idea. What we discover in Buddhist meditation is that this very spaciousness is aware. There is no aware center in this spaciousness, but this very spaciousness is already our awareness. So this is not a space of visuality. It's not a space of sounds, etc. It's the space of awareness. So it's not like space with a point to the center, but space which is aware. Yeah, and the space has no borders. It has no beginning, no end. And discovering this space is actually the essence of Buddhist meditation. And I repeat what Guru Padmasambhava said. He said that all phenomena abide in mind. But then he continued. He said that mind abides in space. So we discover this space where the mind abides, where thoughts manifest. And then the space does not abide anywhere. So there is no ground, no final destination, no final point where we can come. Just this spaciousness, which is basically empty, is in a way a final point. But this is not emptiness where there is nothing. This is an emptiness where there is everything. And understanding this constitutes actually the essence of Buddhist meditation. Discovering this, not just intellectually. We don't need to believe it. Yeah. You don't need to believe what I'm saying. It doesn't make sense. Whether you believe or you don't believe is the same, because it's still mind. Believing is mind. Not believing is also mind. Accepting is mind. Rejecting is mind. Agreeing is mind. Refuting is mind. And the point is to go beyond mind, which is judging and thinking. And what we discover, we can call it empty space, but just to give a name. Because to give it a name, we can give it a name to communicate, but this name, of course, does not reflect the very essence, the very meaning of it. Okay, this is what I wanted to say, and I hope that you were not only listening to what I was saying, but also trying to refer to your experience, how it correlates with your experience, which is always there. You don't need to remember what you experienced before. You have this experience right now because you have mind, you have thoughts. You can discover this mind, you can discover this spaciousness right here, without need to go somewhere to some special place, retreat place or lab, etc. to discover it. It's always available. So I hope that this talk was useful, and if you have questions, then please, you're welcome.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Since I am sick, then I just discovered that I have maybe a huge fear of death.
Yeah.
So
Then
how do you see death?
well, the death is not a problem. The fear of death is a problem.
And do we need to deal with fear, or what do you think?
Yeah, well, we can, of course, we can in different ways reduce this fear, but then there is always a chance that it will come back even stronger. Because some people are reducing fear taking chemicals, no? Yeah, different kind of chemicals. Some people say that alcohol is not a solution, yeah? But from chemical point of view, alcohol is a solution. Yeah. And we are trying to dissolve our problems, and alcohol or other chemicals, psychoactive substances, etc., that give different kinds of illusion or just divert our attention or just destroy our cognitive capacity. So actually trying to solve psychological problems such as fear of death using chemicals, any kind of chemicals, including pharmaceuticals, is in vain. Yeah, it doesn't solve a problem. It's like just learning how not to look where the problem is, or just destroying the capacities. It's like using guillotine for fighting migraine, because all these chemicals, they also destroy our body, they destroy our consciousness. Yeah. And sometimes it cannot be restored afterwards. But it's easy, yeah? It's easy. You buy a bottle, you drink a bottle, or you go to a doctor, they would prescribe you something like some kind of antidepressants, etc., and you feel fine. No, my friends, psychotherapists, they're joking that happiness is a properly administered antidepressants. Yeah. So something like this, proper combination. But this is not a solution. The solution is to open up to this fear and to understand that this very fear is your mind. This very fear is your mind. Discover how this fear works, how this fear unfolds. Who is afraid? Who is perceiving this fear? This is the only way to deal with fear. If we are trying to escape from this fear, it will catch us. So we are not trying to escape. We can only face this fear, the fear of death. First of all, we understand death is inevitable. It's inevitable. It's not because we have some kind of a terminal disease at this moment. We all have a terminal disease called life. Yeah? It ends with death, now or later. Yeah. Maybe you don't know, I was recently diagnosed with metastatic melanoma. And then I came for treatment, and they sent a psychologist or psychotherapist, social worker to talk to me and to calm me down. And she was talking to me and said, "Oh, now I'm to help you, etc., etc." And I was just sitting, receiving this treatment and relaxed. And then I talked to her and said, "But sooner or later it happens, no? Now or later it happens." And then she was much more stressed than me. Yeah. And then after some time of talking with me, she asked me, "Well, what is your job, etc.?" And I said, "Well, I'm a meditation teacher." And she said, "You know, I had an idea I would help you, but in real sense, you helped me to relax." Yeah. Something like this. Yeah. Yes, of course there is fear. But there is no place to escape, because it's like we cannot escape from our shadow. But we can recognize that shadow is a shadow. So if we are afraid of our shadow, no way to escape. The only way is to recognize that this shadow is illusion. Yeah. and we cannot escape from it. So the fear, the same thing. The fear is just some kind of manifestation. And whether we have fear or we do not have fear, then this spaciousness where the fear is manifesting or not manifesting is the same. So this is where we take ultimate refuge. In this spaciousness, it does not depend whether we have fear or not. This is what we say in Buddhism, we say refuge is a famous, like we take refuge in Buddha, in Buddha's teaching, in the community, etc. But the ultimate refuge is in this emptiness, yeah, which does not depend whether there is fear or not. So this is the only way to deal with this fear. And in Vajrayana teaching, in Buddhist Vajrayana teaching, we have a very, very powerful method. It's not easy, yeah. It requires something from us to apply this method. Like Spanish people have a very, very powerful expression as saying, tiene cojones. Por hacer eso, tiene cojones. Yeah, to do this, it requires balls, yeah, literally. In English, they say guts, yeah. Yeah. But Spanish are more concrete. So it tiene cojones. Whether we are male or female, tiene cojones. So this method is called, in Tibetan it is called che. Che means cutting through. What do we cut through? We cut through our ego. And it is using fear in order to cut through our ego, our false idea of ourselves, of who we are, related to our personality. And then in this practice, we are invoking the strongest fear possible. The strongest fear possible. We imagine how we are killed, yeah, burned, cut, whatever. We imagine that we make an offering of our body to different kinds of malevolent beings, like we call demons. Yeah, we have this idea of demons deeply engraved in us. Yeah. So we are offering our body because this is our body that we are holding dear. Yeah. So instead of trying to protect ourselves, we imagine. We are not doing it, like never try to do that at home. Don't try to do that with physical body, but we are trying to do this in our imagination. In our imagination, we are offering our body to everyone who might need it. Maybe they want to eat it, maybe they want to fuck it, maybe they want to take organs, whatever, yeah. Maybe they want to chop and fry to make some kind of shawarma, kebab, yeah. Yeah. Or some Chinese dish, Chinese eat everything, right? Yeah, I'm admiring that, this capacity. When I was in China many years ago, and they would take me to a restaurant, sometimes I wouldn't ask what's that. I didn't want to know what I was eating. Yeah, and now probably that would be okay, but 30 years ago I would rather not knowing what I was eating. Yeah, but the point is that we are imagining that we are offering our body, and this body is being grabbed and eaten and fucked and chopped and cut and burned by whoever wants that. And we are observing this state, we are observing our mind. And through going through this fear, because then really our body starts reacting on this, yeah? But if we manage to go through this kind of fear, then we discover this spaciousness full of freedom. Yeah. But this is not an easy method. Yeah. This is not an easy thing. So this is not for everyone. I'm just saying that what exists. But at least what we can do to deal with fear. First of all, we notice that this fear is impermanent. First of all, we notice that this fear, it's not always there. It's coming and going, coming and going. Then we have an idea that it's always there because it pops up all the time. And we are mainly noticing how it's popping up. Yeah? So instead of noticing how this fear is popping up, we are noticing what's in between its appearances. Because it's not always there. It's impermanent. It just appears, it looks like it's something permanent. Like, you know, when we are watching a movie and it looks continuous, this movie. But there are 24 frames per second there. But we don't notice them. Yeah? But there are some animals who can notice that there are these frames. So in the same way, we are not noticing that these appearances of fear are just frames. And between frames, there is a space, temporal space in this case. Yeah? Impermanence, it's about time. So we discover that it comes and goes, it comes and goes. And when it goes, we relax. Because usually, when it comes, we get stressed. The fear is no longer there, we are still stressed. Then the fear comes again, we are still more stressed. The fear disappears, we are still stressed. So this is how it works. So instead, we observe that the fear is not there, is not always there. Okay, the fear is coming, we discover how we are stressed and we learn how to relax. And then there is no fear, we don't keep our attention, we don't keep our stress. Then the fear is coming again. Okay. We learn to relax while experiencing fear. Fear is still there. Yeah? But then it disappears, and there is no need to fight it when it's not there. There is no need to maintain this fighting mode or trying to escape from this fear, because it's not there. It's not chasing us all the time. It's coming from time to time. So when we understand the impermanence, it means we understand that this fear is raising and ceasing, raising and ceasing. And we learn to relax, at least in between appearances of fear. And then we can discover that it is much easier, much lighter. Then we don't see fear as something solid, yeah, and dangerous, which is always coming. But then we understand that also it depends on our mind, this fear. And we can re-educate our mind to relax in this fear. And fear is just a reaction of our body. Reaction of our body saying there is danger, but there is always danger. So, but we are not supposed to always feel fear. This is the fear itself is not a problem. Yeah? The fear, it can be a very good thing. I'll give you a very simple example. Yeah, you think about your life. So you're like 40, 50, 60-year-old. And then you think, if you had no fear, when would your life have ended already? If you had no fear. You remember about a situation when your fear prevented you from doing something really, really stupid. Did you have this kind of situations in your life that you were afraid to do something very stupid that wouldn't have ended well for you? Yeah, I'm sure. So fear is a good thing. Fear is a friend in real sense. Fear is a signal. It's an alarm. It's not a biological byproduct. Yeah? It's a biological tool, the fear. It's a tool for survival. Yeah? Like an alarm. Yeah? You know? There is an alarm. But alarm indicates that there is a danger. When you understand there is a danger, we don't really need an alarm. But then, when our alarm is broken, it's on, it continues. We cannot turn it off. It continues. Then it becomes annoying. Yeah? But alarm is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Yeah? Like I live in Israel. I lived in Israel for last 9 years. I lived in Israel. And in Israel, we quite often we have an alarm. And first I was like kind of indifferent to it, like feeling, but I don't give shit, I don't care, etc. But then I learned when it like in front of me, 10 meters away from me, this missile fell, not the whole missile, not an explosion, otherwise we wouldn't be talking now, but pieces of intercepted missile just fell 10 meters away from me in the place where I just crossed the street. Yeah. And then I thought, oh, maybe it's a good thing to pay more attention to this alarm. So alarm is a good thing. Fear is a good thing. The problem is that our body, our system is broken, and this button of fear gets stuck. This is the problem. It gets stuck. Yeah? Fear indicates us that something is wrong. That's why there is wisdom in fear. Yeah? But when the system is broken, then it becomes a problem. So the easiest way, the simplest way to deal with fear is to understand that fear is impermanent. And when there is no fear, learning to relax after the fear sends us a signal, something's wrong. Okay, we have a disease, something's wrong. Take a treatment, yeah. Something's wrong. Stop doing things that create conditions for your sickness. Something's wrong, yeah. Don't ignore, yeah. Don't be stupid. Then fear is very good. Oh, okay, something's wrong. Okay, do meaningful things. Don't waste your time on bullshit, yeah. So that memento mori, this is an important sentence in our culture, in European culture. Remember about death. Because this remembering about death, remembrance about death, helps us to stop being involved in bullshit. And just be involved into meaningful things that make sense, that are really important. So that's why fear, it can be very helpful, very good, fear. So this is how we can deal with fear. We just need to tune our body and mind to properly react to the fear, but not trying to avoid it. Okay.
Yes, I still want to ask another question, or maybe it's not a question, because this classes is about your mind, and just now we talk about, we share my experience with you, that I have a space experience. But it seems to me that the space I was talking about is not the space you are talking. You have a deeper level than this one. So can you?
Yeah, I cannot judge your experience. I cannot judge. I cannot judge your experience. I'm not you. I don't have X-rays that look through you.
No. I mean, I sense that you want to see what you want to say is not just this experience.
Maybe.
Just, not just the experience that you want to talk.
Yeah, could be. Yeah. I'm not really talking about experience. I'm talking about some kind of insight. Not an intellectual knowledge, but some kind of insight that we can have through our experience. But not just a relative experience, because experience is something impermanent. It comes, we feel happy, but then it's gone. No, like people who are taking psychoactive substances, and then they feel something, they have some kind of knowledge, etc. But then when the substances, the effect of substances is also impermanent, when it dissolves, when it's absorbed in the body and dissolved, then there is no more this experience. So what's the value? If you can learn something with this experience, then maybe there is a value, but otherwise there is no value. So experience is an important thing, but the experience is a kind of a gate to something deeper than experience. It's like a lab. And you know, in the lab, what should we do in the lab? In the lab, we create conditions which would eliminate many possible interferences. This is what we do in the lab. So this is, for example, how people discovered electricity, etc., or some chemical reactions. So we eliminate interferences in the lab, but we do not create something new. We discover which is already there, but we are not able to notice that because of interferences. But then if you discover electricity in a lab, and we understand what electricity is, we can discover electricity everywhere. Yeah? Wherever we go, there is electricity. Yeah? There is electromagnetism everywhere, when we already learned it in the lab. So in the same way, we have different experiments with our mind, but then we need to learn something from these experiments. Not to see something, but to learn something. Yeah? And then what we learn in these experiments in the lab of our mind, then when we start acting in the real world, we can keep this wisdom, we can keep this knowledge that we previously discovered in the lab. Otherwise, it becomes like a show. You know, there are some scientific shows. It's very nice when they do fireworks, or they do like transformation of colors, they mix up substances and these colors become like it's pulsating green or red, maybe changing every few seconds. Or some kind of like creating steam, or creating some kind of defeating gravity, etc. You know, there are some scientific shows. It's very interesting, it's very nice. Yeah, but what do we learn from that? The only thing we basically learn it is possible. But we do not really learn the nature of these things. We do not really learn how these things work. For learning this, we need to study physics and chemistry. And then we really understand that. So in a similar way, we are learning our mind. We can have different kind of wonders of our mind, some kind of strange manifestations, some lights and sounds and encounters with some beings, etc. Or at least something we interpret in this way. It's all possible. But it's not the nature. Yeah? And in order to understand what it really is, we need to learn, we need to study, we need to discover what is the essence and what are like just interferences or temporary conditions. So this is how we are learning. This is how we are learning meditation, and basically we are learning meditation. It means we are learning our own mind. This is the meaning. Okay, and what we can do now is just to sit comfortably, and discover, yeah, you are moving, it means you were not sitting comfortably, no? Why? Why weren't you sitting comfortably? Yeah. Who was preventing you from sitting comfortably? That now when I'm saying sit comfortably, you have to change your position. What was preventing? Yeah. And the only thing is distraction. It means that we were not in contact with our body and we were sitting uncomfortably until we paid attention, and then we discovered. And then we change. Okay. So we are sitting comfortably and we discover how we feel when there is nothing to accomplish, nothing to expect, nothing to achieve, nothing to solve right now, just sitting. Okay. So to summarize, to end this meeting, we just summarize for ourselves what we learned, what we experienced, what we understood in these almost 2 hours, whether it was useful, and if it was useful, then we can notice the feeling of appreciation and satisfaction that we did not waste these 2 hours, precious 2 hours. And with this feeling of appreciation and satisfaction, we can make a wish that what we learned wouldn't get lost on the way, wouldn't dissipate as soon as we leave this room, or even sooner, but remains with us, so that these seeds of skills and knowledge could remain with us, become stable, mature, and finally bring benefit and good fruits for both ourselves and for others. So we conclude with this kind of mental dedication or benediction. Okay, so we finished for today, and I hope it was useful.